Welcome to the Developer Spotlight. Today, starring John Huntsman. So John, can you tell us what you do for PRC and ERLC?
So I'm actually one of the builders for Emergency Response Liberty County, in which I work alongside my colleague and good friend Rick Goetz.
And then how long have you been with PRC?
So I actually started with PRC on February 2nd of 2022. So it's been about a year and a half, but I've been developing on Roblox for around 8 years now.
So what actually got you into building 8 years ago?
Honestly, it's really fun being able to take still pictures from the internet and then being able to make it come to life on Roblox, all while adding in my own touch to it. And then sometimes being able to take multiple different ideas and kind of clashing them together to create one building. It's really up to your imagination. That's probably one of the best parts of my job.
Yeah, it's crazy that you guys can take all these ideas just from a picture and then throw them into the game. So how do you get these ideas for how a building will turn out and look in ERLC?
So when a project is actually introduced to Rick and I, we're either given like a reference picture from Mr. Fergie, the game owner, or we're allowed to kind of create our own concept if he doesn't give us a reference. Usually that process of creating our own concept really goes starting at Google, and we essentially try to look up buildings that would fit the needs and requirements of our the project itself. Then finding that place on Google Maps to actually create it. The reason we reference real life buildings so much is to be able to be consistent with real life architecture within the game.
It's great that you guys can just look at a picture and see the architecture and make sure it fits the game. What is the hardest project you've worked on that is in your LC?
So I'd say probably the hardest project to this point was actually the themed builds. So for instance, the Halloween and the Christmas update were two of the hardest projects. The haunted house and the Santa's workshop, both in those updates, they both took a lot of time to come up with ideas, and more specifically the haunted house, because it had to flow and like guide the player throughout the house with certain jump scares and so on. That was probably one of the most stressful projects. I believe that was the first time that we had actually done something that was holiday themed. The Santa's workshop was more simple and straightforward, but we still had to be creative and had a good planned layout so that players could work their way through the workshop. But I'd say for the most part, definitely the Halloween update.
Yeah, I can see how the haunted house would take a while because it turned out great. So kudos to you guys on that one.
Thank you.
So what project took you the longest?
So I'd definitely say the project that took us the longest was this summer update of 2022. That update was absolutely insane for the game. We essentially rebuilt the game from the bottom up. There were buildings that had decals, and the game was very flat per se. We went in that update and we completely remodeled the whole game. All the buildings that had decals were replaced with buildings that actually had real 3D windows. So that update was, I mean, it was absolutely amazing for the game, but it took so much time and we had to fit buildings in exact spots, while keeping them consistent with the area, and keeping things like part count and design in mind were definitely two things that even made it longer as well for that update.
What was a roadblock you faced while working on ERLC?
One of the roadblocks that I would definitely say we ran into was for that summer update. We were building the new downtown strip in the Springfield area, and we had put the first block was essentially on a curved block by accident. The whole building, we didn't realize until we were nearly finished with it, was actually in a downhill curve. That being said, like the windows and the doors were all straight, but the whole building was curved downwards, and it completely messed up the whole building, and we didn't realize until we were nearly done. When it came down to it, we actually had to rebuild that whole building, which was just so time consuming because we had other projects going on at the same time, all while trying to finish the summer update.
Yeah, that could definitely be a roadblock for you guys. What do you think your greatest accomplishment is?
I'd say my greatest accomplishment so far is basically just what I've been able to do with my Roblox career. Going from a guy that just wanted to make buildings for fun and putting blocks together to being able to work for such a big group. I mean, that's really fulfilling. And then I think other than that, being able to attend the RDC, which is the Roblox Developer Conference in 2022, that was probably my second biggest highlight of my career so far. I was able to actually go there, meet other developers, meet some developers of other huge games on Roblox, and it was really inspiring actually to see all these people that have built such big games all in one place and being able to network and all that. So I'd say those are probably my two biggest accomplishments so far.
On average, how long does it take to complete a project?
So each individual project is always different, I'd say maybe a good 3 or 4 days, depending on size. I mean, you always have to factor in building size, specific requirements set by Mr. Fergie and other higher ups, as well as other requirements that they may bring up along the way. For instance, an exterior of a building can really be done in maybe a day or two at most, depending on size. Other than that, the interior is really where the time is put into a building. I mean, that takes a lot of time to design and come up with a layout that actually flows and is easy for the player to move through, actually. So 3 or 4 days is probably a good time. Honestly, just depends on the size of the project and the size of the building itself.
Yeah, I could see how it might take a little bit depending on size and how complex you might want it to be and just the flow of things like you mentioned. So with that, how many buildings have you built for ERLC?
So, like I said, there are two builders, myself and Rick Goetz, and we both end up usually actually working half and half on each build. It doesn't really matter if he starts with exterior and then I finish it, or whatever it is. We both really work well together when it comes to building. But some of the main projects that I've had my hands in personally would be the downtown strip, the Rick and John's within the downtown strip, the park area, the news station, the pumpkin patch, and the new mod shop that's actually coming in with this year's summer update.
Gotcha. So, John, one last question for you. I think we need to clarify. You and Rick built the Rick and Johns, is that correct?
We did.
And does that have any particular reference?
So I actually used to live in Kansas, and there is a place in Kansas called Nick and Jake's. And I've actually been there plenty of times, but it's kind of like a sports bar, but like a more higher end, I guess you could call it. So as soon as we got the project of the downtown strip and we were able to put in our own place down there, I was just thinking about different ideas. And I'm like, Nick and Jake's, Rick and John's. I'm like, makes perfect sense. So check that out because it actually is based on a real place. It wasn't just made up.
It's been great to talk with you and get to know you more, and especially have you answer some questions about your job working for ERLC on the first Developer Spotlight.